Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Design Cinema. This is Feng Zhu speaking, and we are at episode 108, Design Basics. So I apologize for the long delay between episodes. I've been quite busy for the past few months, and finally made some time to get this episode recorded. I know a lot of you have been asking for it. I get that in my inbox. So yeah, here we are. So Design Basics. This episode is gonna run pretty long, I imagine, probably maybe at least an hour to hour and a half. So just sit back, relax, pretend you're in a classroom. We already have this chalkboard set up, so you could draw along or just listen in the background, because it's going to be a lot more talking this episode than actual drawing. But towards the later half of the episode, I will be showing you some sketches that I've done, which is a continuation from episode 107, which we had to do some Final Fantasy redesign. So I'll show you how that comes together using all the stuff we'll be talking about. Okay, so let me run through quickly the various topics I'll be covering today. Okay, so again, this episode is going to run pretty long, so let me drink some water here so we can jump in here. All right, so first thing we're talking about is the design industry of 2021 and beyond. So this is from my personal experience of seeing where things are going and the type of job that is out there, and a little bit of a breakdown of why these jobs are the way they are. Okay, and the reason why I know a lot about this is because as a school we do get contacted by quite a bit of studios out there, the triple A's, the double A's, the indie companies, and they're looking for designers to hire. So by judging by the kind of requirements they're asking for, I could kind of guesstimate the workload that's out there and also the type of projects that are out there. So we'll kind of cover that a little bit. Number two over here, talking about the kind of portfolios I see often that get sent to me via Twitter or Facebook, right? I get quite a bit of them on a daily basis. So within a week, there's like a flood of them in my inbox of people just wanted me to review their portfolios. Most of these are students, and they want me to kind of give them feedback of where they stand in terms of industry. And so I'll kind of summarize that to you guys, because that will feed into the rest of this, okay? Next, number three is fun versus work portfolio. Okay, there's a big difference, and we'll talk about that as we get there. Number four is a quick industry job breakdown, okay, related to number one of where you stand in the industry in terms of how you break in. Number five, we're talking about a quick breakdown of design and illustration. I know that there are some illustrators in this channel that are probably listening. So especially if you're young, you might not see the difference between the two industries because they look very similar on the surface because we're all drawing. But underneath it, it's actually very different. Our end goals are completely different. So I'll talk about why that is. And finally, we'll get to this episode's topic, which is design basics. I'll break all this stuff down for you step by step of what are the most basic stuff you should have in your work, right? How to put those things in. So that way your portfolio is now off to a design portfolio versus what I'll talk about in number two over here, okay? And I'll be showing you after all this is done, I'll show you how I've done that by using a example from the episode 107, okay? So without further ado, let's jump into number one. So let me make sure I have a layer. Let's hide the UI here and talk about the design industry of 2021 and beyond. So I'm gonna draw a little timeline here. Okay, let's mark this. Let's see, let's put 97 right here. Let's put year 2000. Let's put 95 actually. 95 is good. And then we'll put 97 here, 2000. We'll put 2005, right? 2011, you see why I put that there, in 2021. Okay, so these are timelines, and this kind of covers the 25 years of history in the gaming industry. Okay, so this is gaming, so let me write that down. Okay, because the film industry, even though they have a lot of new technologies today with VFX especially, but in terms of the pipeline, it's pretty similar to even 100 years ago. Filmmaking hasn't changed all that much. The way they're produced, or the way they're made, the way the pipeline works, pretty much the same. They're advancing quite a bit, again, in the VFX sector, new cameras and so forth, but not much has changed in terms of the type of films that are made, the genre of the film that's being made. However, in video games, completely different in the last 25 years, right? You went from very basic 16-bit graphics to now almost photoreal type of stuff. Technology has changed, the type of games are being defined, right? Like in 95, even something like an FPS, a third-person adventure game, what you call a role-playing game. They're all being defined for the first time. So a lot of these games are the first of its kind, like a Doom game, right? Or a Tomb Raider 3D action adventure. They're the first of its kind, and they define an entire genre of games, right? Open world games came out, a few years ago, and like survival mechanic games, right? So a lot of new things are being invented, and that also changes the way the playing field in terms of our job goes, right? So let me break this down. So 95 is a transitional year, which 3D is starting to happen. Okay, 97 is when I got in. So I actually worked on a couple of 2D games as well as the first generation of 3D games. So during this time period, the pre-2000s, the industry for concept designers is very small. You're talking about maybe 30 to 50 people really doing it as a job title. For the rest of the industry that don't have concept designers, a lot of the concept art was just done by whoever draws well in the company. So even the founders, the programmers, the game designers, they're all doing concept art. And in a way, I think that was kind of cool because you come from a complete different background, and when you draw these things, the imagination is actually quite out there. So you see a lot of really cool IPs being made back in the days with very imaginative worlds, because it wasn't coming from concept artists per se, it was coming from anybody. However, the industry is quite small, and let's just say the concept artists during that time were aged 21 to 25. Yeah. Okay. Then we enter the year 2000s and 2005. During this about 10-year period, okay, from 95 to 2005, the industry's matured to where 3D is the standard now. Okay, so 3D becomes mature. Over here is still 2D to 3D. Okay, so in 2005, you have another generation of designers starting to enter the field, and at this point, a lot of schools are starting. For example, Art Center, Noman, they're starting to teach concept design for entertainment as an actual major. So these kids coming out in 2005 is geared towards the industry, where even for me at year 97, I wasn't particularly trained in entertainment design. I was trained in industrial design, making products and cars and so forth, and using those skills to do entertainment, but I wasn't exactly trained in it. But by 2005, you're seeing the surge of trained designers coming out. Okay, let me mark these real quick. And then 2011, the reason why I put that here is because games like Skyrim comes out, Diablo 3 comes out, and a variety of these games. And what they have done is they elevated these games from kind of a niche, geeky, very small audience kind of group into the mass audience. Right now, millions of people are coming out to play these games. And also you have the YouTube being born, right? Streaming services. So now you have YouTubers who are relying on these games to do Let's Plays and becoming huge and getting millions of followers. So games again went from niche to mainstream. Now they're reaching millions and millions and millions of new players and saturating the world with these video games, right? Video games became cool. So now in 2011, you have another batch of students who want to enter this field because now it's something that's viable, right? Prior to probably 2000s, it's going to be pretty hard to find people who are like, oh, I want to go design for video games, because a career simply wasn't even there yet. The industry hasn't matured. But by 2011, the industry is very mature in terms of how games are made. The pipeline is pretty much settled down. So these students are entering into another generation of game design in which everything has been established. And now we come to 2021 next year, and we're going to get more students, right? So now these students are entering, once they get out of the schools, an industry that's 20 years old in terms of pipeline. And in that 20-year time period, everything has been established in terms of pipeline. Okay, so let me explain what that means. So the people from 95, now they're 20 years later, right? So now they're 41 to like 4, let's just use simple numbers, like 40 to about 50, okay? Their age group. So let's say that group A. And then we take the 2005s, okay, group B, their age between, say, 30 to about 40, right? Somewhere in that age group. And then you take the 2011, the Skyrim batch, right? So I started our school in 2010, right before this hype of video games became huge. When Skyrim came out, it really changed, I think, the entire industry quite a bit in terms of just mainstreaming. So we started the school kind of like the right time when concept art was becoming super popular. So those kids are now 10 years out. So now they're, let's see, group C, right? So they're somewhere between 25 and 30 to 35. Let's just put it somewhere around there. Okay. And then this last group, called group D, of course, is still young, 2025. So what does this mean for you as a junior person trying to enter the field? Okay, because the pipeline is mature, that means the job role for each of these is also defined. Your 40 to 50-year-olds are going to be your senior art directors or creative art directors, okay? Because these roles are being filled. These Group B individuals, okay, from 10 years ago, are what 15 years ago, are going to become your senior designers, okay, filling those roles. Group C are now your mid-level designers, and some are also senior as well. Okay, so those roles are filled. That leaves junior right here. Okay, and this is the most important part about this chart, is that now in 2021, as you guys enter the industry, these jobs are not available to you because each one of them are filled. If you go back to 95, like when I got out in 97, none of these positions existed. So you can actually go into a studio, and this happened to me. I went into my first job as a senior designer, which is really weird, right? Because the way they worked was that the salary was based on title. So they couldn't give me a junior artist title and give me a low salary because they were kind of competing between a different studio. So this studio wanted to hire me. This is Wargen Systems. They make the Wing Commander games. So they want to give me a better offer than what Blizzard was offering me. So Blizzard was offering me a certain salary. I told that to EA essentially. And they say, hey, to come work for us, we'll give you a higher salary. So, but the salary also bumped my title. So I entered the job, even though it was my first full-time design job, my title was a senior concept designer, which just makes no sense, right? And very quickly, I became an art director too. It's like just out of the blue because there was nobody else there. I moved from Wargen to a startup company, and I was the designer, the junior artist, the senior artist, and the art director because there was no other art directors. Simply, again, because there's no positions available. But that time has long passed. That doesn't exist anymore. The industry is mature. So all those people here, they have now filled in these positions. So I remember even back in the days, like Blizzard only have like 23, 24 people, right? So the concept artists like Metzen and Samwise or Sammy, right? They're doing everything. They're doing everything that exists in the game, from the marketing art to the concept art to the illustration, like everything, even in-game stuff. Nowadays, Blizzard is like hundreds of people. So they have prop people, they have environment, they have illustrators, they have everyone filled. So if you're coming to the job market now, to summarize, these positions simply aren't there. And even if your skill level is there, you don't have the experience. And studios generally don't want to hire inexperienced people, even if your skill is good, because they don't trust that you could work with other people within a pipeline environment. So the job available to new graduates for next year is junior. Knowing that, you have to prepare your portfolio for junior position. And this is where we get to the next point, okay? The type of portfolios I see online. So let me draw a new line here. Let me check on time here. Okay, we're pretty good. All right, so I get a lot of private messages of people sending me their ArtStation links saying, hey, Fang, can you take a look at this work? What do you think? Unfortunately, I cannot reply to most of them because there's not much I can say. Here are the three content I see the most, okay? Number 1, number 2, number 3. Okay, the first one eats up about 90% of what I see. The next one's about 9%, and the next one is 1%. Okay, and what they are. Number 1, the 90% one is some kind of landscape. Okay, that generally is either spiky or towery in rock formations. Okay, so something along this line. Okay, and then you have a little dude standing here looking at it. Okay, this is 90% of the work I see. Some are done well, most are not done well, but there are some that are done well, okay? But this is the content. There's nothing there. Sometimes they don't even have a building. It's just a landscape that's painted quite well with some nice clouds in there and stuff, right? All right, the next 9% is photo-bashed New York or some kind of city in a post-apocalyptic state, okay? Some cars down here, there's a bridge, there's a train, and one of the trains falling off, okay? And it's photo bash. Again, some done well, some not done well. And there's a dude walking around with his dog, right? This kind of stuff. Okay. Non-stop. This is 99% of the stuff I see. Okay. 1% of it will actually be designed. For example, it's a throne room. Okay, and it's a king's chair, stuff like that, right? Good architecture, good research. Okay. But look, this is 1%, very rare. So I could go for a month and see nothing but this kind of stuff here. And once in a while, I see one of these. And guess who gets a job in this situation? This person, okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with these two things. However, remember earlier we just talked about junior position, okay, and design position. The issue with these two topics here, post-apocalyptic photo bash and just empty landscape, they showcase very little design skill. In fact, almost zero design skills. They might show you some technical skills like fundamentals, some artistic skills, maybe some painting skills. That's all fine, but that's given. You have to have those skills. What we want to see is, can you actually design things for us? Can you make these worlds come to life with storytelling, with proper props that exist solely for the purposes of IP? With this kind of content, we cannot see it. So no matter how good you are at design, this portfolio doesn't showcase it. So the feedback for this is also meaningless, because we look at it as like, okay, great, that's a well-painted spiky tower. Okay, what do we do with that? We cannot put you on Red Dead Redemption. We can't put you on Assassin's Creed, because we don't know if you possess those skills. So I really like analogy. So let me use this as an analogy and talk about being let's say a chef, okay? So this will make more sense. All right, say you want to be a chef in New York, okay? And you want to cook in one of the good restaurants. Well, you're not going to get in as a head chef. You're going to go in there as, I don't know what they call junior chefs. I'm sure there's a title for it, but some kind of junior chef, right? And the restaurant interviews you and asks you, hey, can you show me, come in the kitchen and show me what you can make. Let me see how you work the kitchen. And you go to the refrigerator and you find a bowl. You take out the milk, you find a bowl, and you fill it with some cereal. Okay. And then you pour a glass of milk. Okay, there you go. And you show the head chef, you go, there it is, ding. That's what I made, right? I'm sure the head chef will be like, you pour cereal. Technically, you did make it, because without you pouring the milk into the bowl, it didn't exist as a full form of cereal, right? And then you go, okay, I also boil some eggs. Okay. You're like, cool, that's my portfolio right here as a chef. Can I now become a cook in your kitchen? I'm guessing most of the time, no way, right? You're not gonna get hired, because the chef's like, this is not really showing your skill. This is something we can all do as professionals. Actually, a lot of non-professionals do this as well. So what this is, like the cereal and the eggs, is pretty much what these two things are showing us, right? It's not the hardest thing to do. You can make it really good. Like you can boil the perfect egg. You can maybe pour the perfect milk into the cereal, right? But it doesn't show your true skills. To become a chef, let's go back to here, you have to show them actual cooking, which is, for example, a bowl of pasta, right, with some meatballs in it, or a roast chicken. Okay. I know you're probably watching going, what the heck is happening here, right? This will make sense in a second here. Okay, here's roast chicken with some veggies and stuff, right? Okay. Now, why is this important? Because if you could roast good chicken or make a pasta, by looking at this dish and by tasting it, we can now know everything that needs to be done to reach this stage, right? To roast a chicken, you probably have to know how to prepare ingredients, how to use the oven, how to control temperature, how to season things, right? All these things that are needed in order to get to this result, all right? So it shows us, without even seeing it, we know you have fundamentals and a bunch of stuff at this stage, right? Whatever this is. Because to get to that, you have to have that. So the difference is with this, the process is too simple. It doesn't show us anything that comes before. To boil egg, okay, pour water, put egg in it, and do a timer. There's some basic skills involved, but it's very, very basic. This is way more complicated than this, and that's what you need in your portfolio. So going back to this 1% that has a throne room, to do this requires proper perspective, planning. What kind of throne is this? What time period is this? What does the chair look like? What does the pillars look like? What kind of king is this, or queen, whatever this is, an evil person, good person, is this medieval times, is this fantasy world? There's so much stuff that needs to go behind, even though it's just a throne room. There's a lot of designs that goes in. This stuff, empty landscape, we don't know what this is. It's like, okay, it looks great, but to get to this stage is not the hardest thing. Now, you might be asking, you see a lot of professionals with this in their portfolio, myself included. I have spiky mountains and towers in my portfolio too. So you might be asking then, how come you guys do it? The pros have it. Then how come we can't put it in a portfolio? Well, let me explain that to you in a second. Using the chef analogy. Okay, so let's go back to the 5-star chef, right? So this chef, let's say you are a chef and you go to work. So for the 10 to 12 hours you're at work, you are catering to a client, okay? The people that come to your restaurant to eat. That's who you're servicing. That means everything you cook up comes with quality. It comes with control. And this means there's stress, okay? Every dish you make for the next, whatever dinner time is, the 4 or 5 hours you're making dinner, has to be perfect. It can't be too salty. You obviously can't burn it. You can't make it taste bad, right? You have to be in your game zone for the entire period of work. Every dish you produce, night after night, has to be consistently good because you are catering to a client. So let me circle this a few times. There's an expectation here, okay, to meet. So this work here is always stressful, okay? No matter how good you are, there's always stress associated because you are trying to meet a client's expectations. You are delivering something. So when this chef goes home and it's 2 in the morning, okay, and they come home and go, man, I'm tired and I'm hungry. I want to eat something. I highly doubt this chef after a 10-hour workday is going to go, you know what? It's 2 in the morning. I'm going to go in my kitchen and spend another hour cooking up this beautiful looking thing for myself. I don't think so. I think they're going to be like bowl of cereal, or they'll be like, maybe I'll make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or maybe at most fry an egg, right? What are these things? They're easy. They fulfill the hunger thing, but they're not hard to make, especially for a chef, right? So this stuff is pretty relaxed. Why is it relaxed? Because there's no client. The client is you, okay? You are your own client. So if you're tired, you're not going to put yourself in a stressful situation. You're going to do something pretty simple. And that's exactly what these things are for professionals. So oftentimes you're seeing a lot of these happen because the pro is having fun, they're relaxing, they're doing kind of stress-free stuff. And so it looks really cool because they're stress-free, there's no clients. And when students see this kind of stuff, they're like, well, the pros are doing it, I want to do it too. But the major difference is the pros don't need a job. They have a daytime job, just like the chef. Even if they put this on Instagram and go, oh, look how well I make this egg, it doesn't affect their work because people know they work in a nice restaurant. They're making a good living doing it. This stuff is just purely for fun, right? But if you're a student chef, go, look, today I fried an egg, tomorrow I fried an egg, next day I fried an egg, and tomorrow I made a cereal. No restaurant can look at your feed and go, wow, I should hire this person to become my chef because you could fry an egg really well. You have to actually show dishes you're making, really nice stuff. And they're like, hey, this chef looks like they're pretty experienced. Exact same thing is happening here. Okay, but there's one more thing here. I could see someone saying, but I've seen AAA games do this kind of work, right? That is true. However, look to see who's doing them, right? For example, the recently released Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right? Which actually has a couple of our FCD grads on it. They do this kind of work. However, who's doing it? They're done by these up here, okay? Most art directors and senior designers. Because in the starting of a project, we do these green kind of blue sky projects, and oftentimes are kind of zoomed out, very far away shots in environments to kind of establish the world. It also sets the tone of the game. It also is kind of fun to do. So you want your senior people to totally relax, get their imagination out, get their creativity out, and just pump these out. So you will see landscape paintings, establishing shots, and all this kind of stuff happen even on AAAs. But they don't last long. They last somewhere between probably 2 months, maybe at most they go to about 4 months. Okay. After this kind of sweet period is over, right? The honeymoon period, basically the beginning of a project is always fun. And we do these kind of blue sky stuff. After this is done, it's like 2 to 4 years of production. Okay. So here you have to really, really design. There isn't much room for this kind of stuff. And so for the 2 to 4 month period, everyone that's involved here are almost entirely made out of seasoned designers. So junior people don't get involved in this at all because the task is too big to give the juniors. So if you're trying to compete with them and just do this and you have nothing else to show, your chance of getting is so low because you're looking at your work and go, okay, you're trying to do what we do, okay, but you're not doing it that well. You're not gonna what you call produce work that's better than a 20-year veteran, right? Kind of like being a chef and you want to produce these really difficult dishes, but you're burning it. You're not making it as nice, and you're trying to compete. And the restaurant's going to see that and go, hey, look, you're not that good yet. Why don't you do something a little bit easier? Just make good dishes versus the hard stuff. Same thing for us, okay? So yes, you will see AAA companies do this kind of stuff, but majority of the work is down here, okay? And this is common sense, right? It's like if you look at a big game like Cyberpunk 2077, you can only do so much of this. To build the actual game, you're gonna have to do all the bars, the restaurants, the bad guys lair, the good guys home, the cars, the props, the costumes, the various equipment that you have on you, the flying, whatever Zoom stuff they have. There's so much design involved in this kind of project that if you only do this kind of fun establishing shots, you cannot build a product with it, okay? And same thing goes for films as well. So when the 2 to 4 years production comes in, this is where juniors have a chance to get in, okay? And that starts to go to our next thing, which is the portfolio, okay? Now that we talked about, hopefully this started to make sense, fun versus work, okay? So let's draw a line down here. Let's get it all the way over here, okay? So fun, work, okay? What's the difference? So if you're building a portfolio, you have to cater to here. Portfolio means it's pretty stressful, okay? It's very time consuming, okay? Requires a lot of thinking, okay? Generally has a spec to meet, okay? Or let me write meet spec. Okay. And it has to have very high quality. So these are things that you have to have in a work portfolio. So your job is to convince an employer out there, an art director out there, to look at this stuff and convince them to trade that for money, right? Because you have to get a salary out of this, right? You have to get, if you're freelance, you got to get paid for this. So you got to convince that is this stuff here worth this amount of money that you want to charge? And this is the hardest part to do. Versus a fun portfolio, you could do whatever you want, right? Whatever. So stuff here is generally stress-free. Oops, stress-free. There are no clients, right? It's the same thing as cooking a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Do whatever you want. However, if you are trying to look for work, most likely no one's going to trade this for this because there's not much value here. For pros, okay, very different. When pros are having fun, even their fun stuff have high value in them. But generally for students, when they have fun doing something like just completely out there stuff, most of the time there has no value in it. And I say this from coming from almost 20 years of teaching hundreds, if not thousands of students. And I've seen this pattern, okay? If they want to build a portfolio that gets them a job, they have to really work at it. They have to really sit down, think about it, and work here generally takes somewhere between 10 to 20 hours, right? So 3 to 4 days to do a single piece. Generally, when they do fun stuff, it's like somewhere between 2 to 5 hours or somewhere in between. So there's a huge difference in quality of what they produce. And stuff here just is not worth value. So right now, if you're building a portfolio for job hunting, if you're feeling that it's hard, it's stressful, it takes a ton of time, it takes a ton of planning, you're probably doing the right thing. If you're just painting another mountain, another tower, another spiky thing, and it's kind of not that hard, it's almost becoming muscle memory, most likely that's not going to help you find work, okay? Because it has no value. It doesn't equal to money, okay? So let's cross that out. Okay, because look at it this way. If this stuff is hard for you and it takes time, okay, to produce, okay, time and effort, that exactly is money. That's why there's an old saying, money is time, time is money. Same thing, because a company is willing to pay for that time. They want to pay you for this hard work and trade you for the money, right? And they get whatever you produce, they trade it with monetary value. That's exactly how this works. So if you're not spending time and it's not hard, then a company is not willing to trade that either. There's no value in it. Okay, so let's keep going here. So we talked about fun versus work. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're good. So now let's do a quick industry breakdown using number one that we talked about. This is more of a summary, okay? And I used this in the past before, which is the pyramid thing. Let's draw a pyramid. Bonk. Bonk. Whoa, turned too much. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And the reason why I use pyramid, because there's a lot more base than it is on the top. So I covered this in a few episodes ago, but it's good to repeat it here. So you're probably listening and go, hey, how come you haven't taught design basics yet? because I have to lay the groundwork here. I have to put all this in to make the design basic make sense, because my design basic is geared towards students. Okay, what to build in your portfolio. It's not geared to professionals. So for you to understand it, you have to see how all this makes sense. So at the very bottom, you have junior. Okay, and then you have your mid, then your senior, and then you have your ADs, and then you have your creative directors, right? Directors, oops, okay. And the further you go up the pyramid, the less these opportunities are, right? The less those jobs are available, because the number of people doing it becomes smaller and smaller. So the easiest way to get in, actually probably the only way, right? Because we talked about it earlier, these positions aren't even open to you. Maybe if you're super good, you're super talented, and you come from a background of designer, so you have a good eye for things, you have a history. But that's generally, in my experience, maybe one out of at least 100 to 200 students. One student have that kind of skill, and they could get into these positions because the companies will open that position for this extraordinary designer. But for the rest of 99%, we get in from a junior position. I got in from this kind of stuff, right? Even though they give me a senior title, I got in because I'm a junior artist, right? So I'm not doing crazy high level stuff. So then you build a portfolio for this, okay? This is where your portfolio sits, portfolio. Okay. So going back to the spiky mountains and the towers, this is not it. This is not a junior artist portfolio. This is you having fun, doing some cool stuff, and nothing wrong with doing fun and cool stuff, but that thing doesn't go in your portfolio. And when you ask someone like me to review them, it's a pointless exercise, because I can look at it and go, okay, that's great. How does that relate to job situation, right? This is not going to get you to, just put it this way. Sometime I'll asking what company do you want to work at, and they'll be like, oh, I really want to work at Overwatch, I want to design for Blizzard, and then I see just spiky mountains. Or it's like, I want to work at the next Elder Scrolls, I want to design their worlds, and I see spiky mountains. Or, oh, I want to work on The Last of Us and design their worlds, I see spiky mountains. It's like your work has nothing to do with, your portfolio has nothing to do with the job that you're trying to get, right? You have to keep it relatable. So a junior's portfolio is going to support all these people up here, right? They're going to give you the specs, and then you go through what you need to do and return those specs back up, okay? And so later we'll talk about what these are, to how to showcase to the people up here, because these are the ones hiring you, right? Your ADs and senior artists, they're at our station looking to see to hire. So you have to build a portfolio that makes them recognize you, that you are capable of this job. And that's what this episode is all about. What are those little things you have to hit, okay? So we'll get to that, and once we get to the demo, but let's go to the next one here, which is quickly, I want to touch upon this one, which is design and illustrations. Let's do another little chart here. Okay, so let's draw a design illustration. Okay, for younger listeners, this probably sounds kind of confusing, because again, from the outside world, they look very similar. It's like, hey, we're both drawing, we're both working in games, we're working on films. What's the difference? Well, the easiest way to separate both of them, right, the two of them, is this. Illustration, directly seen by consumer. Okay, seen by consumer. Design, seen by developers, seen by dev people. So your end person that looks at your work is very different. Consumer is basically the people out there paying money for your stuff. Developers is part of a pipeline. They're not the consumer. The end product has, your work is not involved in the end product, right? So both of these industries are really cool, but when you're building a portfolio, you have to kind of see where do you stand. Because if you're not sure and you're doing kind of a little bit of here, a little bit of here, but neither is good, when we look at your portfolio, we also don't think it's very good, because we have no idea what do you actually want to do. So let me explain this a little bit further. So what does it mean by seen by consumer? So let's take like a book cover, a ad for a magazine insert, even a Magic the Gathering card. These things, let's for example, Magic Gathering card, right? Here's an illustration here. So the consumer who buys this card is 100% seeing this artwork, right? That's why they see it. Or when they see a cover of a magazine, and that makes them want to buy the magazine, okay? They're 100% the consumers 100% sees the art. So your work in illustration is the product. So that means your art has to be really, really, really good, okay? You have to really practice things like facial features, good muscles, good skin tones, good expression of form, especially on figures, right? Because characters eat up a huge amount of illustration side of things. So all that has to become very good. So art is important because people are actually paying for your art, okay? It eats up a lot. Now, there are designing here, but let's talk about that a little bit later there, okay? But art is really important. In design, if someone go watch play a big game, let's say a God of War game that sells something like 9 million units, okay, that's a lot of players. 9 million people are playing this game, but the amount of people that go to ArtStation to look at the art of God of War, it's probably no higher than maybe 10,000 people, at most maybe 30,000, if that. I don't even think it reaches that high. So you're talking about what is that, like 0.01%, right? Because 1% is like 100,000 or something like that, right? So we're talking about a very, very small percent of the consumers, right, are actually looking at concept art, which makes it pretty much nobody sees it, okay? So the amount of people, like, you know, a 16-year-old who plays God of War, they've never seen the concept art for it. They're not going to go look it up on ArtStation. They may not even know ArtStation exists. So that's the core difference here. So for us, art is important, but it is not the most important. It's about 10% of it, okay? 90% of it is it productionable? Wait, productionable, okay? Can't spell productionable. Meaning, does it have good design content? Okay. Is it buildable? Buildable, okay? Is it gonna make consumers pay money for it? Okay, these are things we're focused on. So long as our drawing is okay, that's all we need. We gotta focus 90% on here. Versus in illustration, man, it's gotta be 90% really good art. And of course, the 10% needs good design, all that stuff that comes with it. But 90% of it has to be really, really good art because your consumers are actually buying it. So when you're building a portfolio, you have to kind of decide which one of these are you. Both are fine, but both are very different industries. In fact, they take place in completely different time periods. Okay, in design, we're generally in pre-production, pre-pro. In illustration, is definitely most likely it's in post-production, post-pro, right? So the product is already out. So if you want to, for example, I have friends who are working on The Mandalorian, like Ryan Church, Doug Chiang, Chris Osman. They're designing all the stuff you see in The Mandalorian, the Star Wars show. But nobody sees their concept art unless you go dig for it, right? However, there are marketing pieces done for advertising, the posters, and that's generally done by illustrators. So two different departments, two different time periods, and the work for your portfolio is very different. So I'll just do a quick sketch here to kind of illustrate this a little bit further. Okay, say you're doing an illustration. Well, for illustration, posing, characters, the dynamicness all comes into play. So let's do a character like jumping up. All right, the hair's flowing. There's like dynamic cloth flowing, and they're casting a magic spell. This hand's holding a staff. Right. This is where art directors spend a lot of time making sure that everything here is perfect, right? Perfect pose, perfect anatomy. All right, here's a cape, whatever, and magic spells, right? Then we have a dragon coming over here, right? Coming in, the wings are out, right? And you have to do a lot of comms, right? It's very similar workflow to concept design, right? You have to get the comms, everything approved, and then this is your end product, right? So this is illustration. And this painting is seen by whoever buys this product. So if the Magic Gathering card, this will actually be seen by the consumer. Okay, makes sense so far? Now this is concept art. Okay, this is what it'll look like. Here's the magician standing there, right? Kind of a T pose. And then we're gonna have to copy this a few times. Okay, and there are costume number 1, costume number 2, costume number 3, costume number 4, various staff, this staff, this staff, this staff, okay? So this is V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, right? And the dragon is probably some kind of top-down view. Okay, that, and then there's a side view of the dragon. Okay, something like that, and then maybe a front view, right? So as you can see, the way it looks, very, very different. So what essentially is happening here, this is just blueprints, okay? Blueprints. So this stuff here is seen by developers. Remember earlier I wrote developers see this, not consumers. So developers, who are they? 3D modelers, texture artists, right? Animators, right? So they take your concept art and they have to make it come to life. So these drawings are most likely pretty boring looking. They're pretty stiff, right? So for environments, most of the time these characters are just standing still. And I covered this quite a bit in the previous episodes of Design Cinema. So when you're building a portfolio, we need to see this if you're going for design portfolio, especially for junior artists. We have to see, do you understand how this stuff works, right? So if you're doing a character, think of it more like a costume design. Can you do the variations for this costume? Very different hairstyles, different things that the person is wearing, different costume they're wearing. If it's environment, can you design this entire thing out so we could produce it in a 3D model? But however, those earlier things, right, where we go, this landscape stuff, post-apocalyptic photo bash, you showcase none of this kind of skill. So you might be able to do it, but until we see it, we have no idea. So this is the basics of design, which I'll talk about the second part here, is that how do you put this together? How do you make this interesting? So you could show to art directors that you are a capable junior designer who understands how the pipeline works in the design industry. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's go to the next one, which is building a design portfolio. Okay, so let me take a quick break here and pause this so we don't lose this recording, and I'll be right back to continue with number 6. Alrighty, we are back. So let's continue with number 6, building a design portfolio. So now that you understand all this stuff here, right, what type of stuff to put in, we could finally talk about what kind of basics actually go in. And I'm going to open another PSD file here. Okay, where am I? 6 and 7, right? So let me just kind of combine these together. They're pretty much similar. Let me open up this PSD here. So this is something I actually showed our students here at the school, and I just showed to you guys here because it's pretty relevant to what we're talking about here. All right, let me make a new layer. So let me explain how this works here, right? So chance of landing a job, which is what hopefully most of you guys are watching this for. Ultimately, you want to trade your skills for a job position, okay? So this is the chance of getting a job. You can see only 3% chance of getting a job. Now you have 7%, now you have 20%, and now you have ultimately 70%. So what does this all mean? So the first thing here, okay, so let me just write, this is design basics. Let me amend to this sheet. My basics today isn't about how do you draw stuff or what kind of stuff to put in, you know, these kind of literal things. I'm talking about the bigger concept design basics, okay? So first one is you have to have fundamentals. So here I'm talking about set design. Later I'll share this in environment design, and we'll also do a costume design, okay? So let's talk about set design, which is kind of a locked environment, okay? The first thing I'll do is have fundamentals. This is your perspective, your vanishing points, know how camera works. But however, knowing this is not gonna get you a job. Notice I only put 3% because most of artists know this kind of stuff, but it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's kind of like a chef knowing how to turn on the stove or how to use a spoon, right? These are given things. That doesn't prove anything because you haven't used this for any product, right? You only understand the basics of it. However, it's also extremely important. You have to have good foundations. If your fundamental sucks, forget everything that's coming over here. So you have to have this, but having this does not get you a job. That's all it means, okay? So you have to spend a lot of time, and our students, for example, spend half a year learning this kind of stuff, all for producing this, okay? So sometimes they're 7 months in, 8 months in, and they finally are able to use fundamentals to do this, but it is heavily required. Next, you have 7%. So 7% means you could find a good base, and this is something in episode 107 that I talked about. Is a lot of students, their base already sucks. It has no content. A base means, let's take Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right? Since it just came out, Ubisoft has taken the background of Vikings versus the English, right? They have castles and they have like Viking. They chose this historic background as their base, and they're gonna put their story, their take on it on top of this base. So same true is for movies like Gladiator, Saving Private Ryan. Right? These are all things that have very good foundations that you don't have to do anything. The base already there. All I gotta do is research it. So it's so rich in the base, and then you put your stuff on top. So but a lot of students, they start with a very bad base. So in this case, for example, like environment, you want to make sure that whatever you start, even there's no furniture in here, there's no set dressing, the space itself is fun. Like a square room or a rectangular room is a boring base versus you start with Notre Dame as your base, right? Again, go back to 107, episode 107, I talk about this. If you have a good base, you already have a good start, okay? And that's why a lot of films tend to put their products in a strongly defined base, right? Historic films and all these kind of things. That's why the rarest type of film is science fiction, and the rarest games are science fiction because the base isn't there. So you have to make everything up from scratch, and that means expensive. It means time, right? So a lot of movies, they chose how to do that, and same with games, right? That's why every Assassin's Creed, for example, the Paris one took place in a revolutionary time of Paris. Why? Because there's a lot of conflict happening then you put your story in it, it's interesting. And then when they did, not Unity, the next one, where it's in London, right? Or Syndicate. They chose industrialization of London. So you have the factories coming in, you have the big giant machines, because it's an interesting time period, and that becomes your base. So having this base doesn't get you a job. It just shows that at least you're capable of finding something that's interesting. But that only makes you about 7% chance of getting a job. So basically not important. Okay, now comes 20%. Now you have a chance of getting a job, right? 20% chance of getting a job is better than 0. So some students can actually find work with this kind of content. So what it is set dressing. Okay, set dressing is once you have the base, can you put in the right elements, the common sense stuff? So in this case, like a room that has table, bed, drawers, right? But even this, it might sound so simple. This actually requires common sense and some kind of research to put through. So if you have this done well, you could actually sometimes find work. And we have students that get into a studio that could do this. For example, say let's go back to Valhalla, the Assassin's Creed game. Once they have the Viking world established, go, hey, we're going to do Vikings. Well, somebody has to fill these forts with weapons and with tables and all this kind of stuff, right? That has to make sense. It cannot be random. So you find a junior designer. If they can have that in their portfolio, they can most likely pull off this job. So no design really required. This is mostly just common sense stuff. But I'm telling you, actually finding this kind of designer is actually quite hard because most people, let's go back to the earlier, right? The spiky mountains, some rock formation, it shows zero skill in this setting. So therefore, we have no idea if they can do it or not. So if you have this, you already have a chance. Now let's go to 70% chance of finding work. Okay, so this is storytelling elements. This requires planning, thinking, problem solving, and most important, storytelling. And this story is not, I'm not talking about storyboard, characters talking to your storytelling. I'm telling about, are these set dressing here enhancing the narrative? Is it showing me something that's not default? Okay, I call this here IKEA. Okay, like you go to IKEA showroom, everything is there, every piece is there, but it looks like nobody lives there because nobody lives that way. No one lives in a showroom. When you have actual people living in a space, they have things like water cups, they have tissue paper, right? They have lamps, they have the other like photo frames, they have things they brought in that's not part of this set. Like IKEA, everything there is from IKEA. But in a real home, you might have something you bought from vacation. You might have a t-shirt on the table. You might have a frame that you bought from some other store. It's a mismatch of stuff that comes together that tells you who actually lives there. So that's what storytelling is. So in this case, for the students, I did a demo of someone who's in a post-apocalyptic world. So I know a lot of people photo bash the New York. That's just the big picture stuff. It doesn't show us too much about storytelling. But if you actually take that and do a room, right? So someone living here, so it's a bed, there are photos of their family. They have some water bottles for food and water. They have a generator that's powering, maybe they're trying to fix a motorcycle. There's a map. There's a bunch of health stuff that's being stored, like first aid kits. They're running power out through the room. When we see this, we're like, okay, good. You're taking the IKEA set, which the bedroom comes with this, and making a story out of it. And this stuff will get you a job. Because if you could see this in your portfolio, even though it's pretty basic stuff, we could tell you're capable of working in a pipeline scenario. Unfortunately, we just don't see this too much in student portfolios. We oftentimes pretty much just see something like around this, or not even that, right? Especially like, let's move to environmental, right? External environments. So here, fundamentals, number 1, you have to have your horizons, evaluation point, that's given, okay? Next, choose a good base. So big giant rocks, right? That's a pretty good base. So most students, they stop right here. They put a person looking at it, they're done. But when we look at this, go, okay, great, you have a rock formation, it's quite interesting. How does that help our story? How does this help the narrative? How does this show us that this is particular to this IP? We don't know. So again, we can't tell what kind of skills you have if you just show us a mountain formation that's painted well. It doesn't show off anything. This gives you only a 7% chance of finding work, right? Next, let's put some set dressing here. So I put some buildings here. Good. Now this is going to get you that 20%, right, that we've written here. By putting some buildings into the landscape and make it sort of make sense, like, you know, does the architecture sort of match the terrain? Does the people who live here kind of match this terrain? You make that well, you know, make that good. Now you have a chance of finding work. However, this becomes much, much harder. So, but you don't have to make this up. You can even put a castle in on an environment. That helps quite a bit, because at least we could tell this is all kind of fit together nicely, okay? But most people don't have this. They just have land formation or something really far away. For example, they have a tower way in the background here, or a castle way in the back. And the thing is, we cannot tell if you can integrate that into the environment. If you want to put something in here, put it as your midground, put it right into the frame so you can see how you design out when a man-made material meets a natural material. How do you solve those problems? We want to see your common sense abilities there. Okay. Next, the hardest part, storytelling. So I took this scene here and putting story elements. So in this case, I know it's really rough, it's hard to make out, but I'm trying to put like some beasts like elephants, and there's a throne up here. Say the leader, the clan comes back and they're having a celebration. So they painted their rocks, they decorated a bunch of celebrated type stuff. So now you're looking at the scene, go, okay, I see the natural environment, I see the man-made structure, and lastly, I see some kind of story happening. And you don't even have to paint all the people. You don't have to do the posing, because we don't care about the poses in concept art. You could just put none of these people here and still capture this by the set dressing, the decorations, the color. We could tell, okay, this is going beyond simply putting buildings into a set. This is telling story, okay? So hopefully this is all starting to come together here. And that's what I mean by design basics, okay? Step 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go to a costume design, okay? So fundamentals is important. You have to have foundation. Make sure your anatomy is good. Make sure your basic human structure is good. And then start with a good base. So in this case, let's say it's a magician, okay? So find a good costume just to start the base. There's no props yet. And then you set dress it. So you put the basic stuff on, like a staff. Maybe they have interesting gloves. They have some trinkets. But this design here, once you're done, is still an NPC. You could copy this 20, 30 times and it's okay, but it doesn't make it into a special character. To achieve the hardest part is that now you have to design this thing to become a character themselves. That means personalization, storytelling. For example, maybe one of their gloves is a different design. Maybe they have an injury on their shoulders. Maybe their staff is a complete different design than what's happening here because they got it from their best friend or something, right? Something is happening. So when you look at the design, you could tell, okay, this is going beyond the simple costume design, they're getting to character design, okay? And this is gonna get you the jobs, okay? So in this case, I put an animal, they might share similar design motifs and so forth, okay? So this is the basic 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? Foundation, good base, set dress it, storytell on top of that, okay? So let's just repeat that one more time because this is what this episode is all about. Good foundation, have a good solid base to start from. That means it's interesting. Even if you don't do anything with it, it's interesting already. That's a good base, okay? So the rock formation stuff, that is a good base, but you can't stop there. That doesn't do anything, okay? Use that rock formation, those spiky mountains, to do the next stage, which is set dress it. What are you gonna do with that spiky mountain? Do you put a structure in here? Do you put a vehicle driving through it? Do you put a bunch of people or characters walking through it? What's happening here? And who are these people, okay? And lastly, storytell. Why is this building here? If you put some structures in the spiky mountains, what are they for? Is it a fort with evil works in it? Is it a garrison that's stopping, between the two borders, so there's a war going on? What's happening, okay? And if you go back to the Assassin's Creed example, say this is a castle, right? That's your base. So you found a really good castle and you use that as your base, okay? That's good, but it's not gonna get you a job. Okay, next, I'm gonna set dress this castle. Well, set dressing a castle is pretty easy because we could find this stuff on Google. So big tables, candles, chandeliers, right? But you do that well, okay, you have a chance of finding work now. Even on Assassin's Creed, you can find work because they need set dressing. However, what's the story element? So in their game, they're fighting with Vikings, right? So if this castle is under siege, then you will see certain storytelling elements come in. For example, they might be stocking up food. The blacksmith is producing a heavy amount of swords and shields and kind of low quality, but high quantity because they're in the state of war. So that the producers, they're stacking this stuff up maybe in the main gallery, or maybe they're stacking up in the throne room. Who knows, right? There might be some horses that now they're stabling inside the castle because they have to protect them from trebuchets, right? So now you're looking at the set dressing and the story elements. A story is taking place. You look at this thing, you're like, oh, this looks like a castle under heavy siege. That's pretty cool. So doing this work is what's going to get you hired. Okay, let's take this a little bit further. Okay, and I'll show you one more thing here. Okay, which is this. Let's break these steps down even further. Okay, so let's go here. So step one. Okay, let's look at this. This is what most students do. Now, I'm going to use a set design as an example, but these notes apply to environments as well as character and costume design. Okay, so firstly, a lot of students start with a boring base. Okay, rectangle room, 4 walls. This is pretty meh. It's pretty young. It's like this is what we're going to start with. No matter what you put in here, it's probably pretty boring because your base is boring. It's flat walls, giant geometry, nothing's happening. So what you want to do is you want to break it up with geometry. Okay, have things in here that are 3D by simply adding a fireplace, 2 pillars, making the windows, cutting some windows out. This room is really more interesting because there are 3D elements in here that changes lighting, that changes the way the room feels as you walk through it, right? It's now a little bit better, but still kind of boring because it's still just a rectangle, right? There's nothing happening. So let's keep going. Now we break up the space and we start to play with the X, Y, Z. See, now I have Z space. That means you go up and down. So things like balconies, staircases, corners, you see. So this room now is no longer a rectangle, but now broken up in various spaces. This instantly makes this place interesting looking visually. Just compare it here. Even though these are just thumbnails, this already looks better than this. And we haven't done anything yet. We simply just made an interesting space. So imagine if you do a good job with this. If you could reach here, it's already much, much better than here. But when I get these portfolios online, most students fall somewhere right here. Like their base is just already really boring. And even though they spend time like painting little bricks and stuff like that in here, or putting some little tiny detail in here, completely irrelevant because the starting point you already lost. It's already bad. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. Let me hide that circle. I don't want that circle there. Okay, here we go. So let's keep going. Next, take your space and make it exploration or explorable. Offer different pathways. Okay, don't just go into a room and just an empty set. Okay, so again, this applies to outdoor environments. So for outdoor environment, there might be different pathways. There might be roads leading to something. It's basically making you feel like this world is much bigger than the single joint that you've done. So in this case, I open the door A. I also open a nook over here. That's a B. I also have a door C. So if you're a person walking this space, you want to explore these various areas. And even though this is a single piece of concept art, it makes it feel like there's a lot more to it than the single room. And that works really well in a portfolio. And it works even better when you put it inside of the actual game, because a player might go, hey, let's go to A, right? Most people probably just go to A. But on the way to A, they have to pass this table that I purposely blocked, they have to pass this fireplace, they have to pass this little nook over here, and then they get to A. So on the way to A, they're really experiencing a lot of these kind of elements, and I haven't even set dressed it. It's just visually really interesting. Now if they go towards C, I block the path with this table here, so they have to go through this way. So now it's gonna most likely look at what's on this table. I put a shelf around the corner, so they might even look at the shelf. So they're gonna experiencing whatever we put there for you to experience, they'll most likely see it. Okay, so instantly this environment starts to take on the right type of set dressing that's going to tell a story. But we haven't even put those things yet. We only put in the basic set dressing. Okay, so that's exploration. Next, we're going to play with sound design. Okay, a lot of students forget about the sound and material. Sound does a huge amount of work in games. So in this case, for example, you could walk across a creaky wooden staircase, like then you step onto carpet. Then you step onto wooden planks that makes a different sound than the floorboard. Then you step onto some tiles. Then you step on outside, maybe it's grass. So within just a few meters, you are experiencing 4 to 5 different material changes on your foot. And for the sound designers, they're gonna have a good time building all this out. And as you go by the fireplace, right, the fire's gonna make sound. Maybe there's something on the table that makes sound. Other things like birds outside the window make sound, trees in the wind make sound. And all those things you could put in your concept art. And we want to see that. We want to see that you totally understand how to make this world come to life. Okay? And same is true for character design. So if you're doing costume design, are there things on their body that can make sound, like little bells that could jiggle? They could have maybe some leather on them so when they move, you can hear that heavy clothy material brush against their shoulders. All these things are part of your design basics. Okay? Don't just do this. But unfortunately, this is what 90% of portfolios I see online is just this. Okay, so sound design. Let's keep going here. Particle light, practical lights. Okay, so practical lights are things also a lot of students tend to leave out. This again only applies for environments, obviously. So, but sometimes we look at the concept art and go, hey, this is nighttime. We have no way to light your set with practical lights. So practical lights are things like candles, light bulbs, right? Things are not the sun, essentially, right? They're artificial in most cases. So in this case, before Seattle didn't have that, now we added those in. And not only does it give you light sources, it also gives you more things to put into your set. So now we have chandeliers, we have candles, we have these sconces, we have who knows what these things are, right? So now your set dressing becomes more and more rich as we put these things in, okay? So these are practical. Let's keep going. Point. Now we have animation, okay? Something else that we have to constantly remind our students to do. So animation generally comes in 2 types, okay? I'm not talking about doing animation, TV animation. I'm talking about things in your scenes or things on your costume that could potentially move. So there's 2 types. There's static and they're dynamic. So static are things that animate but doesn't move positions. So for example, a tree that's rustling in the wind, a plant that is their leaves being blown by the wind or they're moving throughout the day, candle lights, fire in the fireplace. These are all static animations, but it does move the environment. So just by standing here, something in this space is moving, like curtains, right? Curtains is another one. If the window is open, the curtains can move. And all this stuff you can simulate in today's video games, right? No problem at all. So without you doing anything, there's life to this room. And then there are dynamic animations. So that's like cats, dogs, birds flying outside. So they move from point A to point B. And now video games are really good at simulating these life forms, right? And it's gonna get even better. Right now, most of these ambient life, they can only walk like on a straight ground. So the cat kind of just walks around, dogs walk around. I'm pretty sure in the next generation of games, you'll see cats jump on a table, jump on a fireplace. They might even interact with you because pets are really popular in video games. So developers are gonna spend more time making them have some AI so they can come to life. And if you put in your concept art, somebody can look at that and go, hey, that's kind of cool. Why don't we actually put a cat into this thing and do some AI on the cat so you can interact with the environment, right? Play with the plants, maybe jump on a fireplace. Why not? These are things that you have reminded the team to do, and they might actually spend the time to put that in, okay? So that's animation. And then lastly, the hardest part, this is the one that gets you jobs, storytelling. So up to this point, this is all set dressing. But even if you got this far, you're doing really, really good. However, if you go to the last percent, the hardest part, and putting a storytelling, your portfolio is going to start to really, really stand out. Okay. So what are storytelling? Human stories, relatable things, right? And I want to just zoom in here to make it really clear. Human stories. Okay. We are human beings. We relate to other human beings. So these details are things that instantly remind us of probably who lives here as in this environment. For example, by looking at this, and I know this is a real quick sketch, but there's some stuff in here. For example, maybe there's a family of 3. Maybe the farmer that lives here is a heavy set person, so their chair is like kind of broken and just kind of crunched in. And then you have maybe a kid who's only maybe 4 or 5 years old, so their bowl is different than the adults that's eating. The food's different. So just by looking at this, we could tell there's some kind of story happening. There might be a small portrait of a painting on the wall so you can see who they are. Here I put some pastel drawings. Maybe the kid runs around and draws stuff all over this wall. This is where the family hangs out. So the kid is just using chalk, essentially chalking up the wall. And there's some cute drawings here from a kid, right? The door's kicked in from them going in and out. There might be some family stuff here like books, things that they're reading to their kids, the type of food they're eating, the kind of books they're reading. all these things are relatable elements that as soon as you see it, we can start formulating a story about who actually lives here, right? Now your sets becomes from IKEA into a living world, okay? And I probably repeat this 10, 20 times now. This is what you want to see in a junior artist portfolio. Are you capable of pulling this stuff off? And if you like to draw characters, same thing. What's on this character? What's on their costume that's trying to tell a story? Well, what are they doing with this kind of stuff? You know, like injuries or different, maybe one of their hair is braided differently from the other ones. It basically raises the questions like, hey, how come it's like that? Why is this character a little bit different from an NPC, for example, right? So, all right, so this is today's episode is all about design basics. So I want to run through that one more time. So let me, before I get to the illustration of what this could look like. So let's go through this. So one, start with foundation, but don't start with a boring thing. So this one's not good, okay? Break it up with good geometry, whatever this is. If it's a character, make it have interesting geometry. You know, is it a tall person, short person, you know, giant muscular person, whatever it is, the geometry, 3D-ness of it is interesting, okay? Next, make sure you break up the space, okay? So it's not just a very basic form, but interesting. Play with the XYZ axes. Make your stuff explorable. And this works with costume design as well. So if you just have a shirt on and a pants on, that's it, that's all you have. There's not much to explore there. However, if you put, for example, an outer layer and a cape, big gloves, rings, pendants, right? These are all things that makes the eye explore this costume, that we could see layering behind it. And I know right now some of you might ask, but my character don't want to have those things on. Of course, in the real world, not every character needs to have layers of clothing, but we're talking about building a portfolio here. Doing concept art for established IPs and drawing requirements, that's one thing. Building something that's going to attract the eye of an art director is completely different. So we always tell our students, in the real world, we might actually have sets that look like this and have costumes that are simply a t-shirt and a jeans, right? But that works fine because you're already working, you're on a real project. But if you're building a portfolio, no matter how well you render this, how well you render a t-shirt and jeans or an empty room, it's not interesting, right? Because if you work on a real project, the IP will make it interesting. Say you did like, you know, just NPC characters for Assassin's Creed. Doesn't matter, you worked on a big IP, right? That's gonna get you another job. But if that's all you have and you don't have an IP behind you and this is all you have, it's not interesting. You want to make sure that this is what you have in your portfolio. So instead of doing a character with just, you know, the costume is just t-shirt and jeans, make it a hunter, right? Make them wear hunting clothes and hunting gear, cool props, a cool hat, you know, like a medieval hunter, right? So it's got a big blade over here, it's got some swords over here, it's got things to live off the land so they could camp out, it's got a tent. So yes, there's a lot of details here, but that's what we art directors want to see. We want to see, are those details, first of all, make sense, and two, is it telling a story? Then we could evaluate based on that. If you could do that, you could do a costume of t-shirt and jeans, right? But if you only have t-shirts and jeans, we have no idea if you could do the hunter without the gear. Okay, that's all I'm saying. So let's keep going here. Next, material and sound design, followed by make sure you have lights. So for characters, that doesn't apply, but for environments, make sure you have lights. Okay. For animation, do you have things that move? So for characters, it could be hair, it could be things dangling off their costume, trinkets, you know, things, pendants. These things are, or they might even have a pet like a bird, right? So in this case, I have a little lion standing here, right? So that thing can move. So there's a sense of movement with the design. And lastly, the most important here is, do you have story elements as design props? Okay, does it start to get into the world? Is it pushing the narrative? Okay, all right. So this is sort of a breakdown. Let me see what time it is. Okay, we're still good. So this is the kind of stuff that we always push our students, and most students, again, they get to about stage 3, stage 4, somewhere around here, and we have to constantly push our students to get it into this zone and push it to here and push it to here and push it to here, and it's a lot of work. So if you're learning at home, you can even print something like this out, put on your wall, which is what we tell our students, and check off the list. Go, okay, look at your design and go, what stage am I at right now? Am I in a boring stage right now? Am I only in geometry stage? Am I only in just basic set dressing right now? Well, how far am I? Am I in a stage where there's story elements, there are story details in here, are all these things in? Okay, so Anyways, I'll leave this here a little bit, and I'll put this online. You can find it on my Twitter, by the way. So you go to my Twitter, find this image, you can print it out and use it as a design guide for your design basics. Okay, so we're done with step 7 here. So now I'm gonna take a quick pause and show you very quickly how I designed this Final Fantasy HD that I've done using everything that we have talked about here. Okay, so I'm gonna take a quick pause and I'll be right back. Alrighty, so let's try to finish this episode off with the for the examples. Okay, so let me just remind for those who haven't seen episode 107, you can go back and take a look, but I'll open up some of the files there. Okay, so what I was gonna do, let me save this and just close this so we don't eat up all the space. Let me keep this one open because it's part of what we want to show. We'll use this as our guide. Put that there. Okay. So I wanted to redesign this little town, Narshe or Narshe. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce this word, but from Final Fantasy VI, it's a little mining town that's in the beginning of the game. I really like this little world. So what I want to do is, let's go back to here. We got to review this in order. Okay. Do we have fundamentals? Okay, we have to have that. That's given. But do we have a good base? So the good base starts with you finding the good base. So in my case, I found some European towns that looks. I'll talk about why I like them. Okay, they look visually very cool, so we have a good base. Just like how these AAA games use these worlds for their base, right? And something I noticed I really like is that none of the roads is straight. There's nothing here that's 90 degrees. So that's already starting to give me a little bit of this. Where is it? Okay. Now we talked about breaking up the space. So my base alone comes with this for free. I don't have to do anything. The base already broke up this perfect geometry, perfect rectangle. That's boring, right? So these streets naturally create that sense. So I'm gonna use that as my base. But to create my story element, to create the design that makes this not just copying references, I'm gonna put in these kind of industrialized piping and steam stuff, because the original one had a little bit of it. You can sort of see it there. Okay, but this is like 1993 or 94, so they didn't have the technology or the assets to put together, but they're being powered by the steam that's coming through the ground. So I really want to push that into a more industrialized town, but not exactly machine-like, because that's a little bit too industrial, but let's try to do a mix. So my goal is to put these two together, but look at it separately. The town is cool, these things are cool, therefore, even without me doing anything, the base is very strong. And that's what I mean by this step right here. Okay, start with a strong base. You're 7% there. Okay, if you add foundation, you're 10% there. That's good. 10% is better than nothing. Okay, let's look at the interior. Let me erase the mark. So the interior, I want to also start with a good base, and I found these good references. It's just geometry everywhere. I don't want this room to be empty inside. I want to have different wall spacing. Nothing here is 90 degrees. There's almost like a maze. You're going here, there's all these little nooks and crannies and furniture everywhere and a lot of beams, right? So this is what I want to use for my interior reference, and combine that with a little bit this these piping and stuff that we saw from the earlier. Okay, so look at this reference sheet. This is a good base. So even if I just literally put this stove in this room, you already bought 20% there. It's really pretty good, and actually you could probably find work with this type of stuff. Okay, so that's what the design basic means. Okay, have a good base. So now let me open up, let me shrink these. The drawings are done. Come on, let me close this one. We don't really need this one anymore. Let's put it here. So these are going to be pretty rough sketches, yeah, because I only had like 3 hours or so to put this stuff together. Okay, let me start with the first town, which I think is this one. Okay, so here's the first sketch I did for Narshe. Let me zoom in here. All right, so I drew those European towns and used the base for everything I need to do. Notice the let's go through here and compare to our little chart here. Okay, and we want to make sure we have all this. Okay, first, is my environment boring? Okay, no, I don't have a rectangle, everything. I don't have perfect perspective in here. Everything's kind of off 90 degrees. Everything's kind of different directions, right? That's part of the design I want to capture, because visually it makes it very interesting. Okay, next, am I playing with X, Y, Z space? Yep, yes, I am. I have upper floors, I have lower floors, right? I have geometry going everywhere, so you can really go and explore everywhere. Okay, which is the next one. Do you have exploration? Yes, I have alleyways that go this way Right? Make sure on the layer here, I could go this way, I could go into this little door here, go down this path here, I could go in this little alleyway over here, I could go out here, right? So there's a lot of areas for exploration. So as an environment, this is looking kind of fun, okay, visually. And I drew all this top-down view because that's the original game as well. You're looking down. So I didn't really have time to put them into production shots, but hopefully this gets the point across. These are very quick. These are about 35-minute, 40-minute sketches here. So I didn't even have time to clean it up. But so forgive me, these are not so cleaned up, but you can look at the other episodes for a better execution of these drawings. I also did not record the process because you can watch, again, the previous episodes, especially the farmhouse one. It could be 106, 105, which I show you how I draw these drawings, right? So I'll show a little bit of it, the process in a second here. But basically, let's continue running through the process, right? We're doing the design basics here. I'll be covering each step. Next, do we have things that make sound or have material differences? Okay, so yes, we do. We have snow. Whoops, wrong layer. Let me delete this one. We have snow to like tile. So we have different material here. We have fireplace, right? So tons of different materials. A lot of things that can make sounds. We have these machines that could be churning along. We have chimney that's bellowing smoke. We have little shops that's probably making shop sounds. Snow could be falling. So we're catering to all that to make this world come alive. Next, do we have practical lights? Yes, I do. Notice I already put in some lights here. So the windows have lights. There's some door lights, which you can barely see. They're very rough, but they're basically in here. So we have practical lights. Okay. Do we have things that have animation inside? Yes, we do, because we have chimney smoke is one of them. The snowflakes that could flying by, right? This shot's a little too small, but I also ran out of time. I wanted to put some little animals rocking around, like little dogs and stuff. But essentially, we could put it in. And lastly, do we have storytelling? And this is where it's gone from reference to how you combine to tell a story. So here, we're just doing an external set. Let me delete this. Okay. So storytelling is essentially how this town is laid out. Also, how do I combine these things? So you can see mine carts going into a building. You're seeing these machineries connecting these pipes into various rooms. So something is happening here. So that's going to make your art director look at it and go, okay, this set's kind of interesting. This is not a default European town that I drew. There's something else added on top. And that something else is storytelling. So for example, you look up here, you can see, okay, what's this stuff doing? Why is all this stuff going in here? Why is all this steam rising from the ground? Okay, and that's what we mean by storytelling. This is no longer IKEA. This is being set dressed to push the narrative, okay, which is a mining town. Okay, let me show another one here. I did another pass on this. Okay. So I did another pass on the exterior view. So this one, I kind of like this one, although I don't know if this one, it's kind of straying a little bit from the original design. The original design is closer to this one, but I just want to try it because in concept design, we rarely show one of anything. We've got to show multiple design passes. So this is my second take on it. So I made the roof a little bit sharper. I kind of make this town a little bit more vertical, a little bit more in the Z direction. So here, the buildings are about 3-4 stories tall. Here, they're becoming like 5-6 stories tall, much, much taller. But I kind of want to create this space to see how you'll feel. And also make the machinery a lot more stand out, I guess would be the way. So they're standing on roofs, you can see here. So these things also follow the same rules that we talked about. So the design basics, right? So let's run through that again because we are teaching a class here. So we want to repeat these things. Okay, so first of all, first step, is it boring as a geometry? Nope. Nothing here is a perfect rectangle. Okay, so design basic number 1 passed. Number 2, does it have 3D geometry? Okay, we have a ton of 3D geometry. So it's not just textures, it's things that break geometry, like chimneys, these pipes, right? They're not on a flat surface. Okay, next, are we playing with the XYZ spacing? Okay, yes, we are. We have things in the X, in the Y, and in the Z. So visually, it's pretty fun. Do we have exploration? Yes, we do. We have multiple paths going this way, this way, right? Lots of little doors everywhere. Here's you can zoom in. Here's a door there. There's a door over there. So a lot of things for you to play around with. Okay. Do we have sound design? Okay, we covered that already. We have snow, tiles, all that. Do we have practical lights? Yes, we do. We have lights, street lights, little windows, big windows, right? Do we have an animation? A little bit here, right? We have chimney smoke being blown, snow falling, and so forth. And of course, storytelling is the integration of this stuff into the building. So instantly, this becomes a unique design. This is not just regurgitating a reference image drawn just to show you basically a reference. There's something happening here that is within an IP, right? So an art director looking at this go, okay, you're solving some kind of design problem. There's something interesting here, and this does take some time to put together. Okay, so I'll show you the last one here, which is the interior. Right, so here's one of those inns, because in the video game you actually come back to this town and run around in the inn, so it's quite interesting. So here I've taken the second direction I have, which is these kind of spikier, taller buildings, and making a very maze-like building. It's almost like, I think it's about six stories tall maybe. So it's very playing really with the vertical space here, and I kind of like the way this feels, because to me, Final Fantasy, especially these older ones, is all about the sense of an adventure, of exploring. And every set is filled with small details to enhance the world. And I want to capture that for this town, because this is just starting town. And I wanted, if we were to reboot this game, I want to really sell the entire feeling of the game within this town, like mystery, exploration, fun, danger, right? All that stuff is here, and I want to use this little hotel to do that. So let's run through this with our design basics. Number one, is the geometry boring? No, I don't have a square room. Do I have 3D geometry? Yes, I have it everywhere, right? Do I have XYZ space? Yep, I have X, I have Y, and I have Z, okay, going upwards. Do I have exploration? Check it out. Let's run the way you can explore this space. Let me do a new layer, so we can delete that later. So you come in from here, new layer, okay. Coming from here, you could go into this, right? You could check in with the clerk. You go up the stairs, go this way, you could go into this little room. You could go into this room. You could go up, continue down the steps, and the take a turn here. You could go to another counter over here. You could go into the back area here, or you could go down this hallway, climb this staircase, make a circle, go up this staircase, go into another small room over here, go into this main room, and from this room you could go into a back kind of relaxed area. You can see a fireplace with some tables, and from there you could go to even a more private room, which is way up here. This is about 5-6 stories up in on this building here. So a lot of fun space to play around with, and I'd love to see a Final Fantasy game that goes back to this route, because nowadays they're all fully 3D. I love a more traditional one where we could build all this in 3D, but you're exploring almost in this view. Anyways, that's for a different episode here. But that's what I saw when I was drawing this. I go, man, this would be really fun to run a little character around in here and explore all the spaces, right? Okay, next, where are we at? Okay, we talked about sound design. We talked about sound design, right? Obviously, this has lots of material. So we have tile, wood, creaky wood. We have these big machineries here that's pumping all the hot air in here. Carpets, right? These are all different materials. Do we have practical lights, which is the next one? Yes, we do. We have practical lights, as I indicated, all here. Do we have the animation? Not so much here, because I don't have pets here, but if I have some time, I'll probably put some cats in here. It would be pretty cool. But we do have all these machines who I can see them animating. We have a bathtub here that can have water moving. We have these curtains that could blow the wind in here. We can have maybe some snow come in. We have some plants over here that can move as well. And lastly, storytelling. So storytelling goes back to our design, which is these. So from the outside, we can see these machines over here. Okay, so these pipes will go in, so they're extracting the geysers that's underneath the ground. They're going to bring those hot air in, and the interior is using those hot air to heat up the place. So they're using a combination of fireplace as well as natural heating to heat up their spaces. So we get these really industrial looking fireplaces that's going to make my design stand out, right? So it makes it our game and not just pure reference. And doing that, again, is the hardest part of our job, because we have to make this look pretty cool. And even though this is a rough sketch, if this is a real project, I think this would be pretty fun to actually take these designs and really break it down to what they look like, start putting it out in 3D and flushing all this stuff out. So I think it'd be quite fun. So I'll see if I have time. I'd love to actually realize this set. I kind of like what this looks like. I can see myself living in this space up here, little window, just looking out into the world. Quite interesting. Okay, so I'll put all these online on my Twitter, so you guys I'll put the high-res version so you guys can download as well. So I apologize that these are pretty rough stuff. I simply don't have the time to finish these things, but at least they're here. I'll show you how these came together, which is kind of interesting, actually. How much time do we have? Okay, I think we're good. Okay, let me shrink these down a bit. Okay, this will leave open. Let me open the PSD. Let's open this one here. Okay. So the way I started these is like any other way of starting. So it was, I started these on a Monday morning. Today's a Thursday, so I actually drew these on Monday, and there's other stuff between the weeks. And if you watch my time management episode, you'll see that I do everything generally on Monday morning. The hardest stuff I get it out of the way. So this is all early rough sketch. So this is this one over here. Okay, you can see that's the same drawings here. However, you can see when I started these, I actually wanted to do a top drawing and a bottom drawing, right? They're like separate sets. So I have a grid underneath them as well. So you can see there's a perspective grid, so it makes drawing easier, right? That's the grid. Let me turn those grids off. So I started with these rough sketches, and as I was drawing them, I thought, hey, they kind of look like they could work if I combine them into one drawing. So I just moved this kind of upwards, right? Kind of purely by accident. I put it like that, I go, hey, that looks kind of good. Might as well just combine them into a single drawing and make the town actually feel bigger. Because here, we're just getting a snippet of the town, like just a few buildings. And same with this one. And I go, hey, at least the styles look kind of similar. Let's just combine. However, that created a perspective issue because my vertical lines are not exactly matching up. So you can see, let me drop this drawing down here. Okay. Let me do a quick perspective check. Remember foundation, we have to have good foundation. All right. So you can see this chimney is here, but the perspective is close. Okay, because they're two separate grids. When I started this, I wasn't planning having them on the same grid. So they're very, very close, but they're off just by a tiny bit. So what I did is I took these and tweaked them in Photoshop. But before I do that, I'll show you the other sketches as well. So here is 3 and here is 4, right? So this is where I saw, hey, look, they're actually separate drawings, but they look like they could work together. Okay, all I gotta do is just tweak the vertical points a tiny bit, and we could combine them. So let me, here's the interiors, by the way. So that's exterior. Here's the interior. So you can see, started also out with 2 different interiors. And let me turn one off. So here's one of them. That's this one. Let me see, which one is this? That's the bottom one. All right. So that's here, and then we have the upper one here, right? 2 separate designs that I thought, hey, we could combine these as well, and they kind of could look good. I think I ended up doing something like this. Because see, the perspective is way off on this one, on the vanishing points. So you can see, I'll try it out here. So you can see this vertical line is running this way. This one is this way. This chimney is here. This one is here, right? So that's a problem. Okay. This line is running here, but this vertical line is running here. Okay, so that's a problem. Okay. However, not hard to fix because we are in the early stage of Photoshop, so we could use Photoshop tools to tweak it. So and this is where foundation comes in. You have to know your perspective to pull this stuff off. So let me show you what I did. So here is. So I actually started drawing them without combining, right? I'll still just drawing them separate drawings. You can see here, they're still separated drawings. Here's town, 2 different versions. Okay. Yep, that's this one. Let me open the other one. I think this is the interior. Oh, this is the exterior. Okay. So here I actually started combining. By the time I got to the second town, I think I could start combining them. So you can see this is actually 1 drawing now, versus this one is actually 2 drawings. Oops, 2 drawings. 1, 2. Okay. And to combine this, I just did a very quick tweak. I'll show you how that's done. So first thing you do is find your vertical points. So let's use the top drawing because my top drawing is going to determine my bottom drawing. So these are my VP lines based on the grid. So you can see the grid underneath is right. Where's my grid? This one here. Right. So you can see the grid right there. All right. So that's my VP points. So here's my bottom drawing. As you can see, the VP points don't line up. Okay. The chimney, well, this line is way off, right? Too extreme. This line is like this. This line is like this. This line is like that, right? So these are my VP points. So if I go to the bottom, this is almost turning to a perspective assignment, but just showing you real quickly. The bottom one, the chimney is here. The chimney is here, right? So we're off a little bit. This chimney is here. So these 2 VPs don't line up because I didn't plan them to line up. But to tweak it, not that hard. So what I did is I took the bottom drawing. Let me turn this off. This is my bottom drawing here. I just used the skew tool. Go to skew and just manipulated the VPs until they lined up, something like this. Okay. I'll do a quick job at it so you can see it. So you can see here, okay, roughly they line up, right? So now if I look at the VP points, they start to line up, right? This is a quick job. You can see it's almost lined up. Just a little bit more tweak to line up. So that's how I did. So I line up the VP points, and let's look at it. Here, what is this one? This is I think this is one of the interior. Okay, so this one is still not lined up yet. So what I did is I took this, moved this over, and then used the skew tool, this one here, and did this with it. So line up that chimney, line up the other chimney. Now they're lined up. Tweak the bottom so that it doesn't get so skinny. Something like this. Okay, something like that, right? And then just tweak a tiny bit. For example, if this line is off a bit, you can just rotate that a little bit. That's correct. Not that big of a deal. These are still rough sketches, so that essentially became this sketch over here. You can see. Right. So that's sort of how I. That's why I fixed it even a little bit better. So, anyways, that's how I did that. So let me close these again and just look at all three in order and summarize this episode, and we're pretty much done. So I didn't do the mech, which I want to save for episode 109, because I think that's a pretty fun one. So we'll save that to 109. Let me close all these. Oh, before I close it, let me open this one up. I have all combined. The goal here is that your final design, by looking at, even though these are sketches, they should have the same feeling as your references, because that's the base we started. You should have this kind of old European twisty road vibe with the industrial machinery vibe, and I think they're capturing this okay. You know? And the interior should have this kind of maze-like, nothing is 90 degrees, nothing is a flat wall, everything has geometry on it, and it's got this old Western Europe feel to it, right, with wood beams everywhere. And I think that is captured here as well, you know, similar vibe. So this is the kind of stuff, okay, if you're a junior artist, today's episode is really about the basics of how do you put this together, okay? And if you have a ton of these in your portfolio, your chances of finding work, even if they're boring like this, right, even if they're just sketches like this, if you have 20 to 30 of these in your portfolio, most likely you will find work, because this is a big need in the industry right now. And that's why I started this episode by covering all those job things that are, you know, being taken up by seniors. These big giant games, especially big AAAs, need a huge amount of junior artists to do this type of work that I'm doing here. So you might have a job in which you are doing interior layouts like this for 6 months to maybe a year of just doing nothing but this, because somebody has to put these worlds together, and that's where you come in. So yeah, so hopefully this episode give you guys a little bit of insight of the basics of how to put this stuff together. And again, I'll leave this up on my Twitter. I recommend you to print this stuff out, put it in front of you as you draw, just physically print it out, put it on your wall. So when you're working on this stuff, just check it off the list, because we do that here with our students. So nowadays it's almost like if they're asking for a critique, we tell them, where are you at? If you're only here, you're way too early for a critique, okay? You gotta take your drawings up to about somewhere here, then we'll come in to help you. Otherwise, you haven't even done your job yet. Well, we cannot help you if you're simply just drawing 4 walls and a floor, right? So we're a character, just a person standing there with a t-shirt on. That's not gonna do it. So all right, guys, I hope this episode was informative. I certainly had a lot of fun drawing these as well. I just wish I had more time to take these to a higher level. But in any case, any questions, concerns, leave it in our comment section. And I promise I'll do a Q&A soon. I think maybe 110 will do it. 109, I'll do the mech for Final Fantasy VI. But in 110, I think I'll do a Q&A. So if you have questions, whatever it could be, just all ask it there. And look for me on Twitter. That's why I'm most active these days. All right, guys. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in episode 109. This is Feng Zhu signing off. Bye-bye.